And we'll have a moment of silence for those joys and concerns, spoken and unspoken. Thank you. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Lauren Hainsworth, Professor of Chemistry and Environmental Sciences at Emory and Henry, and we've been looking forward to this one for a long time.
Right. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me here to speak today in honor of Earth Day. It's the one day of the year that we choose to celebrate this amazing planet that sustains us every single day of every single year. So I'm really, really happy to be here. In December, my colleague Ed Davis and my colleague and husband Mark Hainsworth and I took a group of students to Belize on a study abroad trip, and we were studying sustainability in this tiny Caribbean nation. And as part of our trip, we visited a tiny little island called Tobacco Key on the Caribbean reef, and as part of that visit, we were able to participate in a reef cleanup project that's an ongoing project that they have at the marine station there. So the students, and Mark and Ed and I, grabbed these big rice sacks and waded across a lagoon, a shallow lagoon, onto this coral reef on this beautiful, beautiful tiny little island. And when we'd gotten out to that coral reef, I think what we saw shocked every single one of us. The amount of plastic pollution that had washed up onto this coral reef was just astounding. And everywhere we looked, every square foot, every square meter was just covered in little bits of plastic, some recognizable, some clearly fishing line or fishing net, some lots of broken down styrofoam. There were shoes, there were toothbrushes, there were razors, and so many bottle caps and plastic bottles. It was really, really eye-opening. And we didn't have much time, so we had maybe a half an hour out on the reef, and there were maybe 13 of us, 14 of us. We managed to pick up at least 200 pounds. We took it back to the lab, and we actually categorized it and went through it all and weighed it. It was 200 pounds of plastic pollution that we had removed from this reef. And this isn't the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's not some gyre where plastic naturally funnels and collects. This was just a random beach on a random little island in the Caribbean. And it was really an eye-opening experience for us. So as a chemist, though, and my background is chemistry, as a chemist, plastics are marvelous materials. You can take ethylene. Ethylene is a tiny little molecule. It's 2 carbon atoms. Ethylene itself is a gas. It is a plant hormone, and it's the one that encourages ripening. So if you've ever heard that you can put a banana in with an apple in a paper bag and it'll encourage the banana to get ripe, it's ethylene at work. So this tiny little gas molecule, if we knit them together into a big long chain, you get polyethylene, many ethylene molecules, polyethylene, which is the most commonly produced plastic in production right now. It's the plastic that makes a plastic milk jug that you'd get at the grocery store. It's the plastic that's used in plastic bags. It's super common. If you tweak the ingredients a little bit, you can make polyethylene terephthalate, PET, which is a different plastic. It's a clear plastic, and it's the one that's used for 2-liter soda bottles and the disposable drink bottles, like a little water bottle that you get. Slightly different formulation, a different set of characteristics. And so plastics really are marvelous. They can be strong, they can be flexible, they're clear, they can be colorless or colored. You can draw them into thin fibers. You can mold them into all kinds of different shapes. There's plastic in the windshield of your car that's sandwiched between glass, and it prevents tiny glass shards from flying all over the car when you might get into an accident or something hits the windshield, right? It's a lifesaver. Plastic eyeglasses are much, much safer than older glass eyeglasses. And plastic is also used as containers because it's anti-corrosive. And so we can use big plastic barrels to store the kinds of chemical wastes that are toxic and would be really terrible if they got into the environment. But because plastic is anti-corrosive, we can safely store those things. So there are some really wonderful characteristics, but plastics are virtually indestructible. And that is where the problem comes in. That's the heart of the problem. Mother Nature is a fantastic recycler. There are natural plastics, natural polymers that are made. There's plenty of these. Starches and cellulose that are made by plants in their cell walls. Those are natural polymers. Chitin is a natural polymer that's found in the shells of insects or crabs or shrimp. That's a polymer, that's a plastic. Latex is a plastic that many trees and other plants will exude, and it was the basis for the first rubber products that were produced. So Mother Nature produces plastics, but for every organism that produces a natural plastic, it co-evolves with another organism that can use that plastic as a food source. This is why we're not up to our necks in crab shells, right? They recycle. Mother Nature recycles these things very effectively, and the molecules go back and can be reused. But with synthetic plastics, chemists have short-circuited that co-evolution process. And so there is nothing in existence. There's no bacteria and no fungus that can decompose polyethylene. It stays forever. But what it does do is polyethylene can break down, all plastics can break down into tinier and tinier pieces. And so now we have an environmental problem, not just the plastic pollution that we saw very visibly on the Caribbean reef, but we have microplastics. These are tiny bits of plastic that is a new emerging environmental concern. I saw a study that estimates that humans ingest about 5 grams of microplastics every week. So 5 grams is maybe a teaspoon or a tablespoonful. The comparison in the study said it was about the amount of a credit card. This is how much we ingest every week. So this is part of our world, and these are tiny bits of plastic that we might not even be able to see or be aware of. And in humans, the plastic, I think the jury's out on what kind of harm that might be doing to humans. There's some evidence that maybe there's some toxic chemicals that leach out of those plastics that are bad for us. It's a new field of science, and I don't think it's all very well understood yet, but people are working hard on it. But microplastics are clearly a problem for other organisms, and the example I'll use are filter feeders, like mussels. I saw a study a year or two ago that every single sample of mussel that was, so we're talking about the kinds of mussels that you can steam in like a wine garlic sauce, and they taste delicious, right? These are ocean mussels. Every single sample of ocean mussel that was collected and analyzed in this particular study, every single one harbored microplastics. There was microplastics in every one. They're filter feeders. They have little organisms that grab bits of food from the water, and of course they're grabbing microplastics as well. So we also have filter feeding freshwater mussels here in Southwest Virginia. It's one of the marvelous things about living here. It's a species that, it's not just a species, there's hundreds of species of freshwater mussels. And these tiny, tiny little mussels rely on filter feeding when they're little, and if they're filtering out microplastics and that's what's filling up their stomachs, they're not going to get the kind of nutrients that they need to survive and to thrive. And so it's not just a human problem. This is a problem across the entire ecosystem. So what can we do about this plastic problem? As individuals, we all have probably heard of the 3 R's, at least I hope you've heard of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And that's really a great place to start as individuals. Recycling is a bit of a challenge here in Southwest Virginia, and maybe some of you know more than I do about where we can effectively recycle plastics here, and if you do, I would love to hear about it, because it's not an easy thing to recycle plastics here. In the US, something like 40 million tons of plastic per year go into the waste stream. 40 million tons of plastic per year. And on average, maybe something between 5 and 10% of that gets recycled. It's a very small percentage. Most of it, 80%-ish, goes into municipal landfills. So we're just putting this stuff away where we can't see it, where we're not thinking about it. So recycling is helpful. Another way to decrease our plastic use is to just reduce the use of plastic. And we can find alternatives to plastics. You can find reusable grocery bags and take those to the grocery store and not bring home the little polyethylene bags that just get thrown out. I think something like the average useful lifespan of a plastic grocery bag is on the order of 30 minutes. And that we use it for 30 minutes, you get your groceries home, and then it goes into the trash. That's the average useful life of a plastic grocery bag. You can find bamboo toothbrushes. This is something that I've been interested since I saw so many toothbrushes on that Caribbean reef. You can get toothbrushes made of bamboo that will not make their way to a Caribbean reef. Plastic water bottles, if you can eliminate or at least reduce your use of plastic water bottles by carrying a water bottle and refilling it, those are all really great things and helpful things. Tackling this problem, though, it's a big and it's a complex problem. And I think that tackling the problem will take more large-scale change. We can do our part, and that's important. But large-scale change it can really help put a dent in it. And there are dozens of cities around the United States that have now instituted bans on single-use plastic bags. So when you go into the grocery store, you can't just get a plastic bag. You have to either purchase a reusable one, or sometimes paper is an alternative, because paper can be recycled and decompose. The state of Virginia has actually passed a ban on styrofoam takeout containers. It's not enforced in place yet. It won't. My understanding is it'll take effect next summer. So I know you've all heard about Sustain Abingdon. There was a little mention about the Earth Day celebration that was really put together by the Sustain Abingdon group. They have a list of restaurants on their website that you can look to. That these are restaurants that are not using styrofoam takeout containers, but are using biodegradable takeout containers. And so larger scale efforts like that are really very useful. In South Korea is a really interesting model because their way of managing their plastic waste and their waste in general is just about turned on its head from what we do here in the United States. Something like 80% of all plastic waste generated in South Korea is recycled, and that's a much smaller amount per person, per capita, even then than we generate here, because there are laws about how plastic can be used as packaging. Most of 40% of the plastic that we throw away is simply packaging. It's just extra stuff that we buy that's wrapping the actual product that we're interested in. I was thinking about starting this talk with this little story about I love rhubarb. I absolutely, it's my favorite, one of my favorite things. And I was in Food City, happened to be in Food City, and they had rhubarb in Food City. But it was cut into little pieces, laid on a styrofoam platter, and wrapped in plastic wrap. And it just hurt my heart to see this. There's no reason for that. So in South Korea, that type of extra packaging is minimized, and there's political will to get this done and make it done. There are tipping fees or fees for the amount of waste that you do generate and you send off to the recycler, to the landfill. So there's a model out there. There really are solutions to this problem, and we can't let ourselves get overwhelmed by the enormity. It's a big problem, and it's a complex problem. But we can't let ourselves just give up and get overwhelmed by the enormity of that. In the Serenity Prayer, we talk about the courage to change the things we can. And I think that's an important way to go. When I got back from Belize, I dusted off my beeswax impregnated fiber squares, and I made myself a pledge that I would really try to stop using any kind of cling wrap at home. It's a small effort, but it's the least I can do for the good of our planet Earth. And as we read in the 7th principle, and it's on the back of your program this morning, for respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Oh, questions? Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right.